Hello and welcome to episode 65 of the Foundry Roundtable, a podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. And behold, your tame Foundry author returns. I am Drogyn1701, I am the Trekkie Stig, and I am back. Also back tonight, after a small hiatus, is Markhawkman. Glad to have you back.
Hey. Yeah, I got lost in Delta Belane. It took me a few weeks to get out.
Oh, I thought they were just making up that part about players getting lost.
No, it's true. And with us is our very own 2nd of July hurricane, Hippiejohn.
How did you know what I was doing today? Man, you know everything, Stig.
Well, you know, some say he has eyes and ears everywhere. And some say that's very gross. And we also have a man vying to be the curator of the new George Lucas Museum in Chicago, Greendragoon.
They turned me down on account of my obvious Trek connections.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, the T word is sort of a no-go over there. So, for the news, reminder, voting is still open for Foundry Challenge number 9, The Mirror of Romulus. Is open till July 4th. So if you're listening to us live, you still have some time to vote. If you're listening to the recording, you're SOL. And if you have to figure out what that is, you can go look it up. The Foundry remains turned off on Tribble, so unfortunately we can't go test to see if the new default uniforms made it into the character creator, or if there's any other new stuff. Which, I don't know, we have some confusion as to what Captain Smirk was either hinting at or saying in his live stream on Friday, which it's great to have the Spotlights back, by the way, and to have that live stream to promote them. I think it's awesome.
Which a shout out to Dougglendower. I'm sorry, not even sure how to say that. And like his mission, 404 Error, Admiral Not Found, which got spotlighted.
Absolutely. Did you say that you had finally submitted yours for being spotlighted?
Yes, asked Monday, and then I pulled it twice, over lunch, to make quick revisions.
Yay for it finally being up there for consideration.
Yeah. It hasn't been up there very long, so.
It's still one of my favorite missions in the whole Foundry, so.
Well, Smirk hinted at something possibly coming from the Foundry, but he gave no details, and I think all we can do is speculate. I don't know. You said you took notes, Dragoon. Do you have
yes. In fact, I wrote down what he said. He
Go right ahead.
said, "We are going to be giving a lot more attention to the Foundry over the coming weeks. I can't say exactly what we're going to do, but we've come up with a nice little scheme for the Foundry stuff that you guys are going to love."
Yeah, I remember when he said
I'll
that.
take it, whatever that means.
My thought was actually it might be something on PWE's end, maybe a promotion thing besides just the spotlights and the challenges.
Maybe. I mean, there's a whole lot of ways that this can be interpreted.
Sure.
So, unfortunately, it's still really vague.
So I in many ways interpret that actually as Smirk and Trendy saying, let's start doing things our way for doing the Foundry, because when Brandon was our community manager, he did the challenges a certain way and everything, whatever. I think maybe Smirk and Trendy have come up with some smirky, trendy ideas that are going to surprise us.
And then Tumor Boy is in the chat room.
Paying Foundry authors with bacon?
That's a trendy thing to do. Smirk is Tumor Boy is in the chat room and says he knows nothing of this Foundry scheme, which maybe lends credence to think it's something on their end.
Yeah, to the idea that maybe it's just our new community managers saying this is the way we're going to do it.
Well, I mean, it'd be kind of exciting to see
if you got something
Smirk
interesting,
take his own spin on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as Pax Federatica says in the chat room, any Foundry love is a good thing.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Speaking of Foundry love, actually, let's see. Do you have any more notes, Dragoon?
I do, actually. He alluded to some more in the way of tutorials and whatnot. He was still really vague on it. Let me see. Some of you have been asking for some tutorials and explanations of the Foundry. We are bringing some of those to you in coming future. Either custom made by PWE and broadcast on Twitch, or we will have something in-game possibly. Again, I mean, take that however you want it. Not a lot of details. He did make reference to Al Rivera's P1 interview with that, and said about some comment he had made about new tutorials.
It's good because I mean that's one of those things that we're sort of reticent on, that they were linking to Starbase UGC for tutorials, because I mean on one point that's like awesome. They think we're awesome at tutorials. That's cool, but sometimes it should be the game's developers' responsibility or publishers' responsibility to have that information for people.
I'm certainly hoping that they'll do something with the Foundry in-game, especially for new players, because right now there's not really an introduction to the Foundry for new players. He's kind of made some vague allusions to like ports from Neverwinter. He did make one comment I found interesting, and something I thought was worth passing along. He said that if you play or like Foundry author in both Neverwinter and Stowe, and you see a feature in the Foundry that you like, be sure to upplay it there, because it only increases the chances that it might get ported over to Stowe or to other games, which at the moment would only be Stowe.
Yeah.
But I mean, just something I thought worth passing along. Beyond that, there's just the odd comment at the end about the Romulan asset update he made reference to that we don't know anything about.
Yeah, we don't know what he's quite talking about there. Taco doesn't know what he's talking about. We'll see if we get some clarification on that. Thanks to Taco. We will see. So, in other Foundry news, as far as promoting the Foundry and doing things in the Foundry, I think we at Starbase UGC have finally settled on a new project, a new group project, follow-up to Purity in that sense, but not an actual direct follow-up. And this time we're actually putting it out to a lot more authors, try and engage everybody that we possibly can. In short, what we want to do is essentially create our own sector block. This will be something that you can look at outside the game. It'll be populated with stars and, probably some alien races and things like that. There's a lot still up in the air. But essentially, we'll have this sector block that you can look at outside the game, and then you play Foundry missions that are set at the planets in this sector block inside the game.
And I think the idea is to kind of provide a very loose framework about some of the things that are in this sector, but really allow authors a lot of freedom within that to kind of create their own stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the idea is to maybe have sort of like an initial storyline of a few missions, and then kind of open it up for anyone who wants to create a mission and set it within this sector block.
That's what I've understood from everything people have been saying.
And I mean, I've even heard some suggestions in the initial discussion of like coming up with a website that has like the sector map, and then you could do things like choose to click on a star and find out the mission that takes place from that star.
That was the thing that I had in my head.
Stuff on Stowe Wiki about this, because they actually do have lists of Foundry missions and stuff like that already on Stowe Wiki.
Mm-hmm. Definitely want to do that, but my thought was to have like an actual interactive map, like a Google map that you look at, and you find there's a bunch of stars that are listed, and you go and click on one, and it shows you what Foundry missions start there and how to find them in game. Is my thought, but that is easier said than done. I was looking at a little bit this week of how to create interactive maps, and you can create some great interactive maps of Earth. But I'm trying to which does not help us.
I like the way you said that.
We're not interested at all in Earth, like period. just not at all.
For what it's worth, is I actually know Flash, as much as it's kind of a technology on its way out. But you can make interactive web stuff with that.
Flash is out? I had no idea.
On its way. It still gets used for a few things.
What's the new hotness?
HTML5, I think. Which I find it way harder to use.
Harder because it's more complicated, or harder just because it's harder?
Harder because Flash is essentially a animation tool with programming attached, whereas HTML5 is mostly programming but can do a little bit of animation. I approached it very much from the artistic side.
Of course.
You're a graphics guy.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we move it along to what we've been working on? I will just say that I have been having to move house, so I haven't been doing anything in the Foundry, so we'll move it right along. Mark, you've been gone from the show for a few weeks. Have you been able to get in the Foundry much?
Oh, I haven't even logged into the Foundry once in the past 3 weeks because I've been too busy.
It happens.
That can be tough in real life.
Hippie, how about you?
I never stop working in the Foundry these days. Until recently, because this idea that we just put out there, the group project, the Foundry sector block idea, was kind of what I was working on with Cold Start. So a lot of the ideas that I was going to be using for that mission, I'm ending up offering up to that group of people to say, hey, here's some ideas, use them, don't use them. You know, I'm not gonna care. I just want to go make a mission about fish people. So so what I've done this week is once I found out that project was going to be happening, and that a lot of my ideas would probably port over there pretty well, or at the very least are better to offer to the offer there than for the mission that I was working on. What I did is I sat down, and it all started with me thinking about still wanting to do an underwater scene really desperately, and the words fish people entered my head. And when that happened, I wrote what feels like a very classic type of Trek story based on a water world. So that's what I've been working on this week.
Cool. Hey, have you watched the episode of the animated series with the Aquans?
Yes.
Oh. Well, actually, one of the things I was looking for when I was flying around in Delta Valenus was one of those random exploration missions that, the theme of the environment looks almost like you're walking on the bottom of the ocean. I just couldn't find one, though. Oh, well.
I think there's one or two maps that are coral themed.
There's a few that are kind of...
I think you said that Realm Time turned you on to something that makes it feel a bit more...
Yes, actually. That, for people who don't know, when I first asked people about it, I said, is there some kind of low gravity effect that we can use? And the first answers that I got were, there's a specific map, and no one could remember which map it was. And I was like, well, what if I don't want to use that map? I'm just going to forget about this. And then
I forget what the name is, but I do know what map they're talking about. It's the one... it's the one that I built my Starbase 1 on, that I took you guys to.
But then talking to Realm about...
You're talking about the one that's on the...
It's the Riemann mining thing.
Yeah, it's the Hobus one.
There's something beyond that makes any map low gravity.
Yeah, it's
called low gravity volume 01 or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And it's like a map-wide volume that... When you combine that with the water planes and you're jumping as you're underwater, you've got the low gravity movement, so you move slower, and it really, really is cool. It's low gravity, I think 01, and it works really well with the water. That's all I can say, is that I found that this week, and it does make a huge difference. Thank you, Relum Time. He's the one who pointed it out to me. So,
well, it just goes to show you that, I mean, even like the most experienced Foundry authors, sometimes we don't know everything that's in there.
Yeah, I know. I've certainly kind of dug in every once in a while and discovered something new.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was one I actually found out because I was I'd seen someone redo the Deep Space Nine interior and use that as part of their storyline. But basically the idea here is that you need to fix the environmental controls, and because the environmental controls are on the fritz, the internal gravity is lower than it should be.
Would it be even better if there was a no gravity one?
I don't think the game engine can handle that. I mean, you need a floater, and we can't use those in Foundry.
That's true. Which I think we ought to be able to, but that's another discussion. Greendragoon, what have you been working on?
It's called I Got Map 9 Done.
Yay.
Finally.
wait a minute. It took you like 9 months to do Map 8, man. There's no way Map 9's done already.
Because Map 9 is just a battle for your life while your a runabout phasers its way out of a shuttle bay. That's not nearly as complicated. No,
it's super happy that it's getting so much farther toward done.
I really think I don't know how much done I'll get done this weekend because it's 4th of July and I'll be off camping and stuff. But I don't think I'm very far away from having it ready for beta. Now, 10 and 11 are not complicated either.
Very cool. I had the idea that we ought to do a beta test live stream of, like this is, this is the things you should be looking for when you beta test someone's mission for them. As in, jumping everywhere and trying to break everything.
So I think someone was suggesting on Twitter today that I should just shock everyone and announce part 2 is ready right now.
Yeah.
Well, you guys know me. I always jump everywhere and try to crawl in holes.
That makes you a great beta tester.
It's my standard procedure on any map I've never been to before.
I know, that's why I Foundry test with occasion.
Jump far better than anything else.
Because if Occasion can't jump over it, nobody can.
Exactly.
Well, we're excited to see as soon as you can get it to us. So, why don't we move on to mission reviews? I will go first because I just have a couple of quick ones. I had planned to get to all of the challenge missions, but with my move, I have not been able to. So, I will go ahead and review the 2 that I had played intending to review last week. So the first one was the Coalition by Sarroway. What you do in this mission is you investigate reports of Terran ships near a world that used to belong to the Romulan Star Empire. You find some mirror ships and a satellite that allows you to cross over to the mirror universe by accident, and there you meet a coalition of Ferengi and Romulans, which you then help. What this mission had that made me really like it was it had a very, very nicely done city map. He did well with incorporating map geometry. It was set on one of those that has all the big crystals. And what he did is there's actually only a very small, and this is the smart way to build cities, is there's only a very small area that you actually run around in, and it's blocked off. And then beyond that, there's all sorts of buildings and things that you can see in the distance, so it makes it look a lot larger. So if you want to see a very, very nicely done city, take a look at this one. In this one, the author did remember to name his interact objects. Kudos, because that's something I always forget. He had good combat balance, and he had a well-done destroyed ship interior. It was a very solid mission. The only real problem with it is that there wasn't really anything that made me sit up and say, wow, besides that very excellent city. But he made no mistakes. It was very solid. The story was tight. There wasn't a lot of excess. I kind of would have liked to explore a little bit of the mirror universe. I felt maybe it was a little too small, but I know people try to keep the length down when they are doing these missions for the challenges. Okay, so the differences in the mirror universe that he had rules of conduct as opposed to rules of acquisition. All of his Romulans had facial hair. Hakeev was apparently some great leader who had advised people to work together. The saying is live long and profitable instead of live long and prosper. And actually, he did not destroy Romulus. Actually, neither of these missions that I have tonight ended up destroying Romulus. So perhaps I was wrong that everybody was going to do that. The other one was The Wrong Side of the Rift by Antiborg, which is you are sent to investigate some Tholian activity, and you cross over on accident and meet the Mirror Romulans, who are in the process of creating an alliance with the Terrans, which you think is a bad thing, you try to stop. So, one advice for this author is don't forget to put the sector block when giving people directions to your mission. I've played Stove for 4 years, and I had to ask people where this system was the days system, which is, and I've forgotten again where it is. So, always put the sector block.
Dace? Yeah, I don't remember where that one is either.
Because there's Dace, D-A-C-E, and Days, D-A-I-S-E, which two different ones, and they're in two different sector blocks.
Ew. I was thinking the other one.
Yeah.
It's in Cyberlorum, right? I don't know.
Yeah, Cyberlorum. That's what it is. You're right. But I had to ask. So very, very good advice for authors. One thing about his space map that he made, the first one I encountered anyway, is that it was very two-dimensional. This is something we talked about before, good space map design, is that it will feel three-dimensional, and you got to make sure that everything is not on one plane because that just doesn't look very natural. You meet a lot of counterparts in this mission, counterparts people that you know, which is always good, but you can have a danger of overdoing it. Had a few typos, but I tend not to mark down too much for that. He might have just had a sticky E key because there are a lot of E's left off the end of words. He had a lot of differing dialogue options, which include Vulcan ones, which, as we know, is something that we generally like, but not everybody does. So good job on that. There was a bit on the Romulan station where you had some Terrans who were confronting me and conversing with me, but they were actually on the far side of the room, and it didn't look very natural. So if you got somebody who's talking to you, put them right close where they're in good talking range, as they would be, and then you can just stick a invisible wall if they're supposed to attack you afterwards. Let's see. I liked how he. There was a sequence where you forge a bunch of diplomatic communiques from the Romulans and the Terrans that you then send to either government in an attempt to sabotage this alliance. That was a very clever plot point. There was a very, very, very long station map, dragged on very too long, and didn't have a respawn point. If you're going to have a long map, you need a respawn point, and sometimes even if you have a fairly short map or a moderate length map. Let's see. I like there was a chance to interfere or not interfere with a guy in an agony booth. That was a very Star Trek. Had a sort of a moral question. I very much liked that. Let's see. Some of the mirror differences. There was a Sub Admiral Donatra and a Commander Talmera instead of the ranks that they have or being dead. Let's see. Romulus destruction. Romulus was not actually mentioned in this episode. So. There's a couple more. Obviously, we still have a little bit of time to go ahead and vote on the challenges. I think A Falconer's mission is winning by quite a lot at the moment. Mine has 1 vote, so I'm happy about that. So I don't want to win, but hey, somebody thought it was good.
And you didn't vote for yourself, right?
No, because I'm not going to be able to play them all. I think I won't vote. So.
That's always been my theory. If I don't get to play all of them, I don't vote on it.
Yep. Which consequently means that I have not ever voted one of these things.
I was going to say, how's that working out for you?
I mean, I think if you go back through the episodes of this show, you'll probably hear me saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to play every one and review them all on the show." and then I never get to it.
In 9 challenges, I have only voted in 2, because only twice have I been able to play all of the missions. So,
the downside to having a podcast is everything we say is forever immortalized.
I think I've voted in 3 or 4 of them. I don't quite remember.
So let's see. Hippie, you've got a review.
I do. I played actually with the author this week go through this and help me test for like spelling and grammar type of thing. Realm Time has recently put out Rescue 102, and I don't even know how long ago it was at this point. I played Rescue 101, which was an entrant by him in the Make a Mission in 1 day challenge. Or in 2 days, and he had created Rescue 101. This is the one that I had the very strong response to Commander Evans, who was very much like a Commander Shelby aboard your ship. So this mission picks up right where the last one left off. Quite literally, you're having just completed the things you do at the end of the first one, which kind of threw me a little. It would maybe be my thought would be maybe have some sort of a last time on rescue or something, because it kind of caught me off guard. I hadn't played the previous mission in so long that I was a little tiny bit lost at first trying to remember where everything had left off. So I'm here. I still have Commander Evans on board my ship, and very, very, at least to me, very comically and in a very, very fun way, in the story and in dialogue with another officer, he deals with the having Commander Evans on your ship and having her stay there, of all things. And he gives you a lot of really excellent, funny options to play with around that. The story here is very combat light comparatively. There are a lot of very cool and interesting puzzles that he drops on you in this that I did not expect. He does something I've never seen anyone do before, actually, except for on Cryptic's end. He gives us a diplomacy puzzle. I was playing it with him, and I was, doing is everything spelled right? Does it look grammatically correct and everything? So I didn't end up solving the puzzle, because one option that he gives you with this puzzle when you come across it is have this other guy solve it for you because you just want to move on with the mission, which is one of those, I wish that happened with every puzzle in every game, because sometimes I'll be playing a mission and I actually am in the mood to sit down and figure out a riddle or a puzzle or a dialogue problem, and sometimes I just want to get on past that and not sit and make a notebook pages full of notes to try to figure out a puzzle. And in this case, he presented a really, really fun diplomacy puzzle. There's a lot of good, very well balanced space action, and very, very well placed is definitely something to reiterate. There is, during the mission, when the combats occur, it makes sense that they're occurring, and they're never overwhelming. It feels like you're running through an episode of a television show once again, which is excellent. In this case, he focuses pretty heavily on character, more so than he did in Rescue 101, which is always a plus in my book. I love character-centered stuff. So overall, I would say that Rescue 102 is on the same level equivalent to, if not better than, Rescue 101, and it uses a lot of really interesting and fun tricks that I wasn't expecting. Don't expect, If you've played some of Relum's other missions, he does some really excellent trigger work in, space and ground, and he does some really, really fun stuff. Apparently, this mission was written way back before he learned how to do all of that. He said, "This is a really old mission. I've been working on it a long time." So he didn't aim for the stars with it, and that means that every trick that he does pull off, he pulls off really well, because there was nothing that was a difficult or potentially mission breaking trick in the Foundry that he tried to do. And I give the mission 2 thumbs up, 4 stars. It was great. I had a really wonderful time playing it.
Excellent. Greendragoon, you had a mission review.
I do. I played The Dragon Hunt by Dragon Kata 81. This is the author's first mission, and I got to say that for a first mission, this mission is actually really good. It's got a lot of very strong points. That said, it's not perfect, but especially for a new author, this is like well above the usual fare. The story, or synopsis, is basically you're called in to basically ascertain the whereabouts of a Federation starship that's gone missing. You're sent to basically the space of this race called the Dracothians, who actually live inside the Azure Nebula. And the starship in question was on a scientific mission in their space when contact was lost. So you go through and meet these Dracothians. The first portion of the mission is basically kind of setting up who these Dracothians are. You kind of meet up with one of their admirals. You go through all of their some very heavy security to meet up or basically kind of start your investigations. The middle of the mission is kind of you actually tracking down all these leads, and then it ends with you confronting finding the ship and confronting the parties responsible. So I will say that this is kind of a tale of 2 Foundry missions, in that the middle of the mission was incredibly good, and I seriously mean that. I mean, this especially in the central portion, this mission hit a ton of notes really well. And then the beginning and the end had some issues that I felt. First off, the Dracothian, a good amount of time is spent in the beginning setting up who the Dracothian is, going into elaborate detail on them, and it gets a feeling very much like he is seriously overselling this race, because they're kind of made to. It's kind of this look at my super awesome race and how cool they are and how great they are at everything. Because they're supposed to be super strong, they're telepathic, they've got pheromones, they are incredibly smart, and they're incredibly advanced technology, and like all of these things, been fighting off Klingons and Romulans for years, and like just on and on and on. And unfortunately, only a fraction of those points actually ever play any part in this mission. It just kind of ends up feeling like, look how cool and super my alien races. I actually have kind of a sneaking suspicion that the admiral that you meet in this mission is his player character, but that's only speculation on my part. So after you kind of get through the whole meet the alien race, and they're very secretive, so you actually go through a number of security checkpoints at the beginning as you're approaching the planet. And one of the reasons this feels really awkward is that he actually has you go like zigzag back and forth to different points on the map for each of these checkpoints, and at each point is showing off some aspect of how they're superior to everyone else. Once you get through all that, and you meet with the admiral and start to search through their sensor scans of the area, you track down an oddity in their records of one of the last known locations of the ship, and you track that down, and basically sends you to one of their colonies that has been attacked and more or less wiped out. And it's about, I mean, once it kind of gets going, this actually gets really good. There's a scene on the planet where you're kind of ascertaining what's going on. Everyone's been like killed, and you find like a lone survivor who's on the verge of death, and he just does this incredible scene, and it's all just yellow text, but the scene of where the dying alien is basically mentally showing you what happened, and it's all done through this wonderful descriptive text, and just this wonderful exchange between this of like basing mostly on emotions and vague scenes that you see. I mean, it's never just this is what happens. It's all that descriptive work of you almost kind of feeling it. And it just really, at least for me, really connected and sold that whole situation, really make you feel, especially because this alien dies soon after. And it's just, you're sorry that you lost her because you've just made this emotional connection with her. Episode continues on. You track down, or basically track down, you are getting attacked. And I'm trying to dance around this so I'm not giving away any spoilers. You track it down and you to the next system, and you find the ship. And again, there's another wonderful scene where you beam aboard the starship you've been looking for. There's only a couple of survivors left, and you're going in to save the last few survivors. And while it's a stock map, he does an incredibly good job of selling the scene, because as you're running around this scene, there are fires going off, there are explosions everywhere, and it feels like the ship is falling apart. And it's just that selling that scene that he just does so incredibly well. And you just are totally sucked into that moment as you're racing to try and find these last couple of survivors. And that's great. So we finally wrap things up, and you end up getting to that, confronting the responsible party. And at this point, it starts to kind of slow down a little bit, because you confront this party, and it's pretty good, and the action is really high. And then you kind of take a moment, and you meet this other captain from this alien race. And then again, it kind of starts going back into that fan service of describing. It's actually mostly about the Admiral that you meet earlier, and how he's kind of the James Kirk of their race. And again, it just kind of oversells it. Not to mention, I mean, after this, you actually go back to space and then fight some more. So it's kind of a weird dislodge in the pacing right there for the final battle. I will say one of my big problems with the ending is that what ends up being the motivations for the responsible party really don't have anything to do with the race in question. It doesn't tie back very well. It ends up being it's a known race, and throughout the middle section, there's all of this like illusion and mystery as you're trying to figure out what's going on. And at the end, it kind of ends up becoming, it really was what it seemed to be. There isn't really any greater mystery to solve. And they were doing it for incredibly mundane reasons. So on that end, I mean, it was really kind of a disappointment at the end to not have this like a grand finish to it. I mean, most of the cases he was pretty good about keeping the pacing up. I mean, especially for the length of this mission. But yeah, I kind of felt that the ending didn't quite live up to the build-up. Like I said, I mean, clearly this author does like a lot of things really well, and I don't want to discount that it was actually, I mean, once you kind of got past the sluggishness of the beginning and a little bit of disappointment on the end, it's actually like a really good mission with a lot of like really scenes that do a really good job just drawing you in.
Well, sounds like a very good mission.
Yeah.
So funny story, I was just looking through my reviews, and I actually found the first review, I think, of the Purity series that ever asked for it to be longer.
The series or the mission?
The series, a six episode series, and someone thought it should be longer. Interesting. So let's move on to this, and what we'll start with is actually one that we did last week. Except obviously Mark and I were not here, so we wanted to chime in just a little bit on the removal of the exploration. And I only have just a little bit to say, and then Mark can do his thing. My only thing is that I actually agree with Cryptic that the exploration missions were really pretty bad content, and I don't think they really even deserve to be called exploration. But I don't really like the idea of removing functioning content, because I think the one thing you don't want to do in an MMO is shrink the size of the game.
Yeah.
You want to just keep expanding it. And so I don't think you should remove functioning content until you got something better to replace it with.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel that with them removing content, it just kind of narrows your options down to the few specific pieces of content that they have.
Yeah. But I know what they're doing is they're sort of on an update and streamline thing, and they're taking an inventory of the stuff that got in at launch and deciding, okay, this is up to snuff, this is not up to snuff, and this is not, and this is not, and so, and they're doing something about it. And it's funny, on the forums, I mean, people were taking this formula that they put together as and applying it to other parts of the game, like the formula of these are not very good missions. Some of them, and they're buggy, and they're not intuitive, and people get lost in the sectors. And people were applying that formula to other things and saying, oh, well, obviously because, of that, we should remove PvP, or we should remove the Foundry. And so it's like, well, you don't have to apply that same formula to everything, and neither does Cryptic. They can go on a case-by-case basis.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my really one and only thought on that. So, Mark, what do you got?
Well, I was going to be doing a visual demonstration, which requires us to actually go to Delta Valenus. So, and I need Hippie to join the team.
Well,
There's
why don't
a
we?
Team?
We would have to do a little prep work on that. Why don't we do that next time? Okay.
Well, it's as simple as going there and loading each of the maps I collected and looking around for a few minutes, and then
right. But we found out last week, going into the exploration clusters, we won't be able to follow you in.
Not 100% consistently, unfortunately.
Not 100% consistently.
Oh.
I'll help you set that up for next time, and we can do some video and videotape it before, if that works for you.
And drop it in.
Because that works very well. When I did that with, I can't remember what I did that with now.
The Romulan assets.
Oh yeah,
when people were saying we don't have any, and you were like, "Yes, we do."
You also did it for the ESD Foundry.
It works very well, but in essence, what you were doing is you saying there's some assets in the exploration missions that don't appear anywhere else, right?
Well,
they ought to be saved, right?
I'll pull up the list I made without actually going there and talk about it. Okay, mission T-226 space M. The base map is this moonscape sort of thing that, you have these weirdly shaped rock formations and these things that are kind of glowing and look like they might be plants or might be rocks, and some really, really weird looking plants. The weird part about this particular one is that this is one of those maps, and I actually saw this several times looking at the ground maps in the exploration clusters, is the edge of the map just beyond the part that you can walk around in has these huge mountains that take up a pretty large section of the horizon. And this particular one has two of those large mountains, and then I think it's to the south edge of the map has this long wall that's kind of like this mountain ridge that you can kind of like step on the edge of it, but you can't really climb up on top of it because, edge of the map. The cool thing about this one, though, is, well, it has a shape to the map that you don't see in any of the general Foundry maps, because it has this kind of like it's like a valley between the big mountain range and the two smaller mountains, and then you have off to the east side this deep valley, and on the sides that have a low elevation, it actually has a pretty nice looking panoramic vista.
So I think all of that, I'm not 100% positive because I don't understand the Genesis engine perfectly, but I think all of that is procedurally generated stuff that they can't just like pull that map.
Well, it was generated, but a long time ago, before launch.
Yeah.
And so I think that map exists somewhere.
No, it really is. There is a map, just like a normal any other cryptic map. The only difference is that it was spit out by this tool versus being designed by a designer.
Well, I imagine with so many places to explore, what I'm thinking is that with so many different systems, that one system, I don't even remember the list of letters and numbers you gave for it. That one random system is probably in a list of like thousands of systems. I don't know how we would find specific assets.
I've heard 3,000.
One dev said 3,500, but I imagine that these things have in the game data some sort of a reference to tell you which one it is.
Well, you can find the map by its name. They all have the unique number letter combo.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, moving on. 0845-Delta. Interestingly enough, this particular map has the same basic shape as the previous one. I mean, because it has the same mountain ridge, the same two mountains that are just outside the area you can walk on, except that this one, instead of being a moonscape, it's I'm going to go with Alien Forest theme, because this is one of those maps where it has these big tree things that are really floating mushrooms, and the extremely weird alien plants. They have these big tall things that I know there's something that looks similar to this in the Foundry, but I'm not sure if it has this size of that particular plant. But it has this long, tall stem with a bunch of glowing things hanging from it like leaves or fruit or something. I don't know.
So let me. I need clarification because I'm getting lost in all of the things that you're saying here. Mark, is what is your what is it that you're looking for out of this? I mean, I know you've got 5 systems that you can detail to us in detail. Are there specific assets like this plant or things like that that you found on these maps that you can be like, this plant from this map, this is what I found that was, something that was interesting? Or is this more of a general, there's a lot of assets in there that don't exist elsewhere and now we're just losing them?
Well, it's something of a mixture of the two, because part of the thing I'm mentioning is that this particular shape of map, most of the maps we have in Foundry are pretty flat. They don't have a valley shape to most of them, and
so then the clarification is you're looking for the maps.
Well, like I said, it's a mixture of the two. It's like the base map would be great to have, or at least base maps with that shape, because valleys are something that would be useful to have as assets. But also, in the case of 0845-Delta, it has a lot of plants in it. I think I counted almost a dozen different plant assets used on that map. And I haven't had time to check whether they are used elsewhere in the game, but there's one in particular that I don't remember ever seeing before in my time playing the game. It's this little bush thing that has, it looks like a bunch of little thin, spindly sticks sticking out of the ground with I guess they're supposed to be leaves shaped like surfboards stuck to the top of it. Anyway, it's a cool-looking alien plant.
Is there any way to focus on the actual assets, or this map was interesting? Because right now it just feels like a very general. Like, I'm not getting what you want. I'm not understanding. Like, maybe it's my weakness here that I'm not understanding what you're meaning. Like, what is it that, like, are there specific, like, asset requests from these maps, or is it just the plants on this map are cool?
I'm getting to that.
Anyway, I'm just asking for clarification, man. That's all.
In the case of Delta, it's mainly the plants, although the base map would be great to have. Another thing I noticed when I was looking for these, which I'll get back to later, is the sky files, because a lot of these maps have what seem to be custom sky files associated with them that are, these wide panoramic vistas that have the same type of terrain as the base map, and I don't think we have the ability to use sky files like those in the Foundry. Anyways, moving on. Theta Geminorum Zeta 003-H. Do we actually have the ability to make a map where everything is this pink haze that makes you can't see anything?
Yes, more or less. You can change the backdrop of the map. There's a post on Starbase UGC where Kirkvat went through and took pictures of absolutely every single backdrop, and some of them make an entire map look an entirely different color. So I'm sure pink is among that.
Well, that was the main thing that struck me about that one. Well, and the fact that I ended up going there twice. Yeah, I kept going to random systems, and I ended up bumping into that one twice. Also, it has these stone tablets that I don't remember seeing before, and I don't think there's something we have as Foundry assets. This particular map was using them as D'Arce grave markers, but they look more like small walls than gravestones. Anyways, Zeta Minoris Sigma 552. It's a variant of the mech ground map, except unlike the one we have in the Foundry, which has this big, flat, empty area in the middle, it's one of those that has this long pathway winding through the map instead of a single, flat, empty area. Also, this is one of the ones that has an awe-inspiring panoramic vista for the sky file, because you look and you see things that can't possibly be part of the actual map geometry, but they're like mountains and stuff that match what you have as part of the map geometry embedded in the sky file, so that it looks like there's like 20 or 30 miles of terrain outside the actual map. Which, with this particular map layout, if you go to the edges of the map, you can easily see out into, what is actually nothing, but you're looking at the sky file.
So I think I kind of understand what you're saying, is that there are specific assets and groups of assets on these maps that could be saved and put in the Foundry, and there are maps themselves that could be saved and put in the Foundry. Any number of them. Obviously, there are thousands.
Yeah.
And we're losing them, and they could be put in the Foundry. I wish I could say I saw it happen. I saw it was going to happen, but
yeah, I think my response to it is, I hate to be the negative voice here, but the Genesis engine is dead. The Genesis engine, they're closing the exploration clusters, and we know from dev comments and just from being a player in the game that the Genesis engine and the things created by it are no longer even under consideration for anything. So, and we also know that maps specifically, we've been told that maps take a much longer time to put into the game. So, like I say, I hate to be the negative voice here, but I think, like, looking through the exploration clusters for, the things that are there, like I said, I mean, 3,500 maps, and sure, they're findable by exact number and name, but it's a list of 3,500 to go look for. And we don't even know how the assets upon those things are organized. All those plants could potentially be, they could be built into the map and not something that can be removed. So I just don't know that it's one of those, if wishes were horses, beggars would ride.
But I think it's worth talking about, though, because, I mean, like I said, I hate to see content removed, even if it's maybe not quite up to the standard content. And Foundry is something where if they remove Memory Alpha, it still is going to live in the Foundry, as much as it might suck to have.
But how is it going to live
there.
in the Foundry? There's not actually an interior Memory Alpha map, and if the And if the social map doesn't exist for us to go land on, we can't
they should they should put it in the Foundry.
Well, yes and no. See, we don't have the full Memory Alpha map. We don't have certain. There are certain aspects
we have generic maps that have the science walls and science ceilings. We have the generic science assets, which are the ones that they use at Memory Alpha to make all of the different consoles and stuff. But the actual social map of Memory Alpha, it used to be was like you had a few contacts on there and a few doors, so that if you were at the social map, you could interact with the contact.
Yeah, we've got those things, but we can't add it as a custom map, right?
Right. There is no, unless you were to sit down and somehow completely make it from scratch, there's no way to replicate Memory Alpha, especially the NPCs that are on there that, start my favorite mission. That's why it's such a big thing to me.
Well, see, then I think, what I would do if I were them is if you're going to remove a map, why not stick it in the Foundry before you do? I mean, we have maps in the Foundry already that are no longer in the game itself, and they're useful. They can live on in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we've got ESC dating back to the beginning.
Yeah, we have. Absolutely. Anyway, so why not do that with others?
From my exploration of Delta Valenus, I hadn't gotten to the fifth one. I'd save for later. Atichi 210. This is one of those missions where you fight Gorgons in an exploration cluster. I mean, it's not really all that interesting because they're not, actual enemy mobs on the map. You go around and you see these cloud things that you have to dissipate, which, honestly, from a gameplay mechanic standpoint, it's not that interesting, but from a story standpoint, it's
a touch
more interesting than most of the stuff in the
I think I remember
exploration.
Yeah, it was the one with the kids and the pounding of fists. I can't think of a better way to describe that episode.
Anyways, I'm almost done. Another thing with this particular one is that this actually has a very interesting ground map variant, because it's one of those where you have, building sites, paths between them, which, we have stuff like that in Foundry. This one also has rather rugged terrain, so that when you're away from the building sites and paths, you have like steep cliffs and sharp drop-offs in a variety of locations, which, makes for... Well, it just looks cool. And that's that.
All right, so we've got some other topics. Why don't we move it along?
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's see. Dragoon, what was your topic?
Oh, I thought my topic actually related to your topic.
Oh, yeah?
And that was conveying narrative without dialogue.
Yeah. So I read an article on IGN.com last week, and it was a very interesting article because it was talking about the kinds of writing in video games that doesn't get talked about a lot, which is the things that are not dialogue, which is the objective writing and the the things that tell you where to go and what to do, and which is just as important as anything spoken in the game. Any of the characters talking at each other, because if you don't clearly know what you're supposed to do, it's very difficult to actually play the game and to enjoy the game. And so, I mean, like the things that we do in the Foundry, with names of objectives, even names of objects. If you are told to scan, to go scan something, and you haven't named that something or named it incorrectly, the player might have trouble finding it. So I don't know. There's a lot of it out there. And then I was actually rewatching some of the old Buffy the Vampire Slayer episodes recently, and came across one which is one of my favorites, called Hush. And 3 of the acts of this show, it's like a 5-act show, are actually silent. There is no dialogue spoken. Everything is visual, because there's actually like supernatural force steals everybody's. Oops, knocked over my speaker. Steals everybody's voices. So it got me thinking, is like, how could you do a challenging Foundry, a Foundry challenge like that? Challenge people to make a compelling story with no dialogue. How could you do that?
I don't think it can be done in the Foundry. My reasoning behind that is very simple. The reason that episode was so good and the reason that you were so engaged by it was, in many ways, the actors' ability to sell the things that they were doing with their body language and facial expressions.
Very much so.
We do not have control over that other than a limited number of emotes in the Foundry. So I do not know if what you're suggesting would really be possible.
Well, I say you can do it because you don't have to have any dialogue in a mission.
Right.
But can you make it compelling? That's the question.
So it's a funny thing. I've actually more recently been going through videos that have been talking about conveying narrative through means other than dialogue. And it's kind of opened my eyes to like all of the different ways that you can really kind of tell the story beyond just what the people are saying. I mean, such as even just the way you like set up a level, or like how things flow. Things that you can use like visual cues in order to direct the player. You can like have all of these details that like suggests that a situation is going on without ever being told. I'm trying to think. I mean, so yeah, I mean, for instance, if you walk into a room and the place looks like it's been ransacked and stuff is everywhere, you know that something has gone on here, and no dialogue has conveyed that to you. You can do a lot of things with like what are NPCs doing? What tasks are they engaged in? Even like just kind of working out where things are placed. Like for instance, if you walk into like an admiral's office and there's a bunch of bottles like on his desk, you're going to know something's off with this guy. Stuff like that. And even in the mission I played this week, did this very well, is the use of timed events and having things happen while you're moving through can really convey a story. I know, it just seems to me that we kind of get into this dialogue-centric mode, and we kind of tend to forget about some of these other more subtle ways to storytell.
So I guess what it is that, wow, somebody is echoing back at me. Okay, whatever, it just stopped. I just heard my voice coming back 3 times at myself. I guess part of that is like, yes, we could do it without dialogue, but there's no way we could do it the way that, say, a show like that did it with no words whatsoever. Because if you walk into that room where everything is all a mess, yeah, you know that something happened there and something went down. But if there are no words, if you don't have the ability to, go investigate what happened at that scuffle at the desk and find information that has to be conveyed in some way via words. There's
obviously you'd have to have some words, obviously, like mission objectives and things like that,
right?
And things telling you where to go and what to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. It would certainly be like
a real challenge.
I didn't say it wouldn't be challenging. In fact, it would be incredibly hard. I just am not entirely convinced that it's undoable. I think
Realm Time seems to think he could make a Foundry mission without any text whatsoever, including mission objectives, because he's awesome like that. His words, not mine.
You still have to tell us where the mission door starts.
Yeah.
Yep, that is a big issue.
you can make it show that shows up in the objectives.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
Galen Tome says you would need the compelling parts to be larger scale events happening, forcing each of your decisions in various directions, make the objectives based on reaching different locations.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of said in the past that there's 3 tentpoles to mission design and really game design, and that is story, or dialogue, visuals, and gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
While it's certainly harder to do it without one of those, I think it's still possible, and I think it could be an incredible mission if someone pulled it off.
There you go, Relum.
It's sort of hard for me to visualize how I would actually pull it off, but it's something that you'd have to sort of build it one thing at a time to make sure everything works and make sure the player knew where to go and was getting out of it what you wanted them to get out of it.
Out of curiosity, I'm trying to remember the name of it.
So it was, if I can just real quick, what you just said, Drogyn, is why I feel like it's impossible. Let the player get out of it what you want them to get out of it. Because without a face to convey emotion and without body language to sell the way that characters feel about something, I don't know that any kind of real connection.
Well, there's actually probably a better example for what we do in the Foundry, which is the show's creator, Joss Whedon, actually there's a commentary on it, and so he was talking that he was very inspired by an episode of a very short-lived series, which is one of my favorites, called Space Above and Beyond, where I think for most of the episode, if not all of the episode, one of the pilots is trapped on an alien planet, and he speaks not one word of dialogue through the whole thing, and I'd have to go back and watch it, but it's all about his survival and his actions, and I think you could maybe make it more like that, where there's part of it is that there's simply not many people to talk to.
That could work.
So,
like an enemy mine sort of story.
A little bit.
Out of curiosity, has anyone here played the game Limbo?
No.
It's on Steam, and it's usually pretty cheap. It's a platformer, but it's basically you're playing this boy, like running through this really foggy forest, and there's no dialogue whatsoever, no text of any kind, no spoken words, and what's more is that you're not close enough to any of the characters to read body language, and that still manages to convey a ton of story. So, I mean, I highly recommend you pull out, especially if anyone who's like really interested in those surreal games. I don't know if I'd go out enough to say call it full horror, but it's kind of in that same suspense, surreal
genre
experience.
of yeah.
But yeah, that's a game that manages to tell stories because I mean, you find out all of this information about this boy that you're playing, about how there's a girl that he's looking for that you kind of presume is his sister, and like you run into all of these other people, and just from the things they're doing, you can kind of tell like, oh, this group is some kind of lost boys, and then you're in this abandoned city, and it just all of this like information is all conveyed just through the feelings of the scenes. It's actually a really good. It's not very long, but it's a really good game. So I recommend people kind of pulling it out to really see kind of a game that does things really differently. And I don't see why stuff like that, something like that, isn't possible in the Foundry.
I think
it's
just
tough
for
to
me,
say what is and isn't possible sometimes,
right?
Because I mean we're always pushing limits.
That's true.
I will say I don't even think it's a technical limit. I think it's a limitation of how we think about the games.
A limit of imagination.
Yeah, almost a limit of way of thinking. It's such an atypical way to think about it.
Well, I mean, it kind of reminds me of a lot of those old platform games where the only indication you had as to which way you were supposed to go in a level was to follow blinking arrows. And, you know, there was literally nothing you whether you're supposed to go left or right, up or down, and whether or not you could even move beyond the edge of the screen.
Right, but things like that, like a flashing arrow showing me where to go works when I'm playing like Stickman. There's this great platformer called like Stickman that has flashing arrows that points me in the direction I need to go, whether it's up or down or to the left or right or wherever. But if I were to be running through ST, and I guess you're right, it's a limit on the way that I'm thinking about it, because I couldn't see STO as the kind of place that I run and see this flashing arrow pointing me in a direction.
Well, you don't even need something that obvious. I mean,
no.
a lot of times.
But let me finish my thought, because I'm like, 3 months ago, I didn't think that STO was a game that I would have thought of seeing flashy little cartoon stars appear above my fighter pets from my carriers either. So, anything can happen.
Yeah. I was just going to say there are techniques in game design where they will actually, the way they will position like details, they'll make like certain places they want the player to go more detailed or have like some aspect that stands out visually to draw the player in.
Something to draw you in.
They'll illuminate a door, or just make everywhere else really boring. and like that one. Like all of these like techniques to really, to keep the player from realizing that the space is only so limited and they can't really run off wherever they want.
And sometimes they actually do a sort of, there's reasons in game, in the lore of the game for the arrows to be there. Galen Tone points out that Arkham Asylum, the great one of these great Batman games that's been coming out lately, has the Joker has spray painted arrows because, of course, he's the Joker and he wants to lead you right to him.
Oh, that kind of reminds me of Portal. Portal had like all of those graffiti kind of pointing the way out.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a whole like subconscious aspect to storytelling that often isn't get explored, and it's kind of one of those things that as a Star Trek or a medium based off of Star Trek, we're tendent towards very exposition heavy.
Yeah, Star Trek's never done one like this.
No.
We see about drawing inspiration from other shows, which you shouldn't be afraid to do. But I'm going to have to go back and watch that Space Above and Beyond episode because I haven't seen it in a long, long time.
Yeah, and I definitely recommend people go, if you don't mind spending a few bucks running out and playing Limbo. It's not long, but it's just a really cool just to see how they convey all of this emotion through such a simple setup.
It's amazing what little indie games can do.
Think outside the box.
They kind of have to.
They kind of have to.
Well, also, it's easier to think outside the box when you have yourself to answer to and, well, yourself.
Yeah.
Well, in many ways, the Foundry is its own little indie community.
A little bit. We're always doing things that Cryptic would never do. Just ask Taco. All right, let's see. Hippie, what was your topic?
My topic is collaboration. We've talked about collaboration on the show before, but one thing we haven't talked about is because we talked about the different ways, that Purity got put together, and one aspect of
Clumsily.
One aspect of collaboration to me has always been, especially in a storytelling collaboration, has always been leave your ego at the door, leave your ideas, up in the air, like don't be attached to anything that you bring to like initial ideas about collaboration. So for me, I want to sit down. There's another author that I've been talking to that has a pretty similar sense of humor to mine. Often talks about things, sees things the same way, and we're talking about possibly doing a collaboration. And for me, what that really means is the two of us sitting down and talking about a story and coming up with a story and a flow of the thing that will work for both people. That both people think this is good, and then having the writing of it be something that we choose one of us to write it, the other person then edits it, and then it gets rewritten, or and that would be the way that the writing process would work. But that it's more than just throwing your ego out at the door. In this case, the kind of collaboration I'm talking about includes throwing your dilithium tips out the window, potentially, because all you're really worried about is creating the story and creating the mission. I don't care whether this mission, when it gets created, ends up on my account or his account, or which one of us does, puts it into the editor and gets it onto the server. That doesn't matter to me. All I want is that the two of us, who I think have basically a friendship that will gel into making a good story. I hope that will be able to produce a story and not worry about the specifics and the little like tweaky bits on the end, like dilithium and publishing, and like I don't want any of that to get in the way. And for me, I think that's partially what part of leaving ego at the door is like. In this case, with a more substantive way to look at it, you're leaving the potential dilithium tips you could get for it at the door. So I'm just, again...
Which don't generally amount to much anyway.
So. They don't amount to much anyway, right. So I'm just, once again, really interested in hearing people's ideas about collaborative efforts and how they do it. It's another community question that I'd love to hear from everyone on. So that's my topic.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I can say from back in Purity that, I mean, we really had, I think, great working relationships. I mean, as far as I saw. And being able to, when we had that first story meeting that I was in on, being able to just, sort of freeform throw things out there, and then one writer taking notes and putting it all together, was great. And I thought a really great thing came out of it. So I mean, finding those people you can work well with is important.
Yeah.
We have done a collaborative mission on this show.
Yeah.
Make Diplomacy Go.
Also true.
And that one was very much a collaborative process.
Mm-hmm. And not just with us. I mean, we solicited ideas from the community, from the chat room, from everything.
I mean, I suppose that's a way of video stream your Foundry window and let the other people see, and then kind of offer feedback.
Mm-hmm. I know that Skyping has a share screen capability somehow.
Yeah, and apparently now it works with multiple people.
Mm-hmm. That if two people are working on something, they can both be looking at the same screen and being like, "No, put that over there," kind of thing.
Like, how does this costume look? Which, by the way, do you guys want your cut of the dilithium tips off that mission?
No. I just don't care.
That'd be what, like 5 for everybody?
Yeah, half that. I'm not actually sure how many dilithium tips of things ever garnered.
You can check that, actually.
You can.
Yeah, if you when you go into the Foundry menu screen where you select all your projects and you click on one, it'll tell you.
Oh yeah, but I haven't actually gone and looked at it.
Yeah, I mean, collaboration can be tough because, I mean, if you get somebody with a very strong idea of what something should be and another person with a very strong idea of what something should be, and those are not the same thing, you're going to have some conflict there. So I mean, you want to pick and choose your projects very carefully. You want to pick and choose your partners very carefully. As much as you can. Sometimes when you're in a big group, you just can't choose your partners. It was whoever got invited or whoever showed up, depending on how you've structured it. I know in this new sort of collaborative thing and project that we're working on, it's going to be a whoever shows up kind of a thing.
Yeah, so last night, here's an interesting part. We were talking about that before, and this collaborative thing kind of brings it back up, where I was talking to Rogue Enterprise about it, and he was talking about needing, a story manager, like a story, like basically what Captain P.F. Dennis did during the Purity series. And what I suggested is that it sounds like what we need is something bigger than what Captain P.F. Dennis did during the Purity series. And that is, it sounds to me more like we need somebody who is looking at all of the missions that come in and saying, this fits in here, this fits in here. Like if you put out a mission that has a similar thing going on that could tie into another mission, it's more like an editor position than it is being, it's looking at author number one and saying, hey, your mission is great, we have someone else over here who's doing a mission that could dovetail in with yours, so somewhere in your mission could you mention this thing happening over here, kind of deal.
It's like a script supervisor or something like that.
Yeah, more than an actual story.
More than an actual guy that's coming up with stories. More a guy that's looking at all of the stories.
And that's what at least that's what it feels like to me. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean that certainly could be something, because we haven't yet figured out exactly the structure that it's going to take.
Right.
I mean, my example of maybe a few storyline missions to get it started off, and then a bunch of random other missions set in this area. I mean, you're going to want some more heavily story-oriented supervision in that first part, and then the rest of it's going to be sort of free form, which is maybe an added challenge even. Yeah.
I could see even some authors choosing to work together and build a multi-part storyline, and just leave the connection points loose enough that each one can still do their own thing, but then have them tie together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Race X shows up in part 1, Race X shows up again in part 2, but with a different plot.
Certainly could, because, I mean, one of the things, I should say that one of the things, and I don't think I mentioned this before, that we're trying to maybe do with this series is do some exploration, because we know it's being removed. We know people want exploration. People have been saying exploration since time immemorial here, and even I think Smirk sort of challenged us to do it, to Foundry authors to make what they think should be exploration. So
I think that comes because it's what Star Trek. It's in the mission statement at the beginning of most of the shows to explore strange new worlds.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. I mean, there's a reason we're doing it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But that by its very nature is you might actually need to revisit some of the people that you first explored, and make second contact and third contact, and
every time someone quotes that line on the forums, my first thought is to boldly go where no one has gone before and get shot at by races we've never seen before.
That's a very big part of it, because of course Star Trek was always an action adventure show, always has been. So getting shot at was a big part of boldly going. But yeah, I mean, it's gonna present different challenges than Purity did. Yeah. Purity was much more structured. Well, you can tell it's getting close to the holiday weekend in America because we have fireworks going off right outside. Which I should point out, in my town, is illegal. We are not allowed to shoot at fireworks until tomorrow.
I was going to say,
you're not allowed.
When has that rule ever been enforced anywhere?
Very few places that I've been.
I mean, maybe if they would have set the hillside on fire again, but you know.
It's a very real possibility given our drought. So, I don't know. Anything more on that topic, Hippie?
No, I just love to hear what some of our listeners have to say. That's all. You know,
awesome.
Talk about it in our thread. I'd love to hear what people think about collaborations and how they can work. So
absolutely. All right. Well, let's see. I had another topic. There was actually another article I read. This time it was on Massively, which is every so often they have a column they call the Soapbox, where essentially one of their columnists just gets on and rants about something. But this one was sort of relevant to us because he was ranting about people not understanding how reviews work, and he was saying that reviews are inherently bias. There's no getting around it, and in fact, that's why that's the whole point of a review anyway, is that you want to know what that person thinks. A simple bullet point of what is in this, for us, what is in this mission, it really doesn't do anybody any good, because what they're coming to us to hear reviews is they want to know if we liked it, and we can't say objectively that we liked it. We can only say it subjectively. It's only we liked it because it fit our tastes. And you're saying that this is normal and this is a good thing. And I think I have to say I agree. I
do too. It's hard to disagree with that.
It's hard to disagree with that, because obviously, if I pick up a mission, I can tell you objectively some things about it, and that's only going to give you a little bit. I mean, I can tell you whether I can then tell you whether I liked it, but that may not mean that you like it.
Right.
I will say, there's a few things that you have to be careful of. One, it doesn't hurt to kind of know what your biases are ahead of time.
Sure.
And two, you do still have to be careful of going into review with preconceptions. Like things that you have heard about the mission, game, whatever, that have already colored your opinion before you've even played it.
Well, I can give you a good example of that. I don't like Michael Bay, and I don't like his movies, especially the Transformers movies. So going in, if I were to go watch the fourth one, which I'm not going to do, frankly, I'm going to have just a huge, ginormous bias against it going in.
Mm-hmm.
And an honest reviewer would let you know that beforehand if he was reviewing a mission. Or a movie or anything like that.
I will say, going into Foundry missions, I know that if a mission doesn't give me some kind of character, progression or character work and some kind of, real story work, I'm not going to enjoy it, and I know that.
Wait, is it character and story or character or story?
Character or. I can actually live without one. But usually if somebody is doing one, they're doing the other. So
we were talking about challenges earlier, and doing a character study rather than a plot-based story. That might be a challenge in the Foundry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there are already a few missions that do character-based story. Obviously, you kind of got to be careful with the player character being a big fat unknown, but they'll usually have some secondary character which they develop.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the stories go the other way, where it's just pretty much plot based, and the characters don't matter to the story much at all, because they could be anybody. I have another movie example for that one, Judge Dredd, or actually just Dredd, the new one with Carl Urban. It was not about his character in any way, shape, or form. It was just something that happened to him. Which I thought the movie was good. I enjoyed it, but it was just something that happened to him, and it could have been anybody.
Right.
Well, one of the interesting things about Judge Dredd is always that Judge Dredd really never gets character development because that would make him less badass. So it's usually about things he does and about things that happen to the people around him, and he's just there to haul people off to jail and or shoot them.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, there's sometimes where, you know, that's what the story needs, is just to be a plot-based story rather than character-based.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I mean, character-based story is actually a lot harder than plot-based.
So you gotta get to create compelling characters is probably the most difficult thing in fiction writing, except for maybe coming up with the title. Or names. I struggle with names. Let's see. We wandered away from a little bit. Back to reviews.
Oh, is that what we were talking about?
Yeah. So I think there's a difference between between unbiased and then actually being fair. And I think what a reviewer should be is fair, which is to, you know, as you say, drop some of those preconceived notions in the interest of reviewing the work based on what the work is and what it's trying to be. And I think we've talked about that a little bit before, is, you know, trying to figure out what was the author intending here, and is it living up to that? Dead silence.
Right. Yeah.
Damn it, people, stop agreeing with me.
It's. I guess you're like, what you're referencing reminds me of when I had someone say, "Will you review my combat grind mission for me?" And I was like, "Oh gosh, how am I going to do this?" You know, because I knew,
that's a good question.
I knew going in that I hate that kind of mission, that it doesn't work for me. I mean, I understand them. I see what they're trying to do. And I even can see things that work in them and don't work in them. So when I was asked to review that mission, I kind of had to play it, turning off those preconceptions about what I like and what I don't like, and just say, I know this is a grind mission. Let me see if it does those grind mission things in an interesting and, good way. I had to review that mission differently than when I normally look at something.
I know that there have been a couple missions where I've chosen not to review them because I know that I'm dealing with working against my own bias. Mm-hmm. I realized that it's not necessarily that this is a bad mission. This is just a mission that isn't working for me. And that really isn't fair for me to try and review something like that.
Yeah, and that can be a part of being fair as well. Because if you know going in that, and some people are going to choose to go ahead and play it and give it a bad review, but I think the better way is to choose not to. That's my personal thought. But it's funny because people talk about being objective, and I went to journalism school, and that was the one thing that they hammered into us over and over and over, is that the reporter is not the story. I mean, don't bring your notions to, and your biases and everything that you have to a news story. But you can never entirely be objective. I mean, it's just not possible for humans. And you're always going to view things through your filter. And I mean, if I go to a city council meeting and what I hear is going to probably be different from what the person sitting next to me hears.
And it even goes down to things like which stories you choose to go with and which ones you don't.
Very much so. But reviewing is an entirely different thing because it is very much opinion-based. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what when you're an expert, I think people think of you maybe as being more objective, but there's no way to be objective. And you might say, because we've reviewed well over 100 missions on the show, you might say that we're expert mission reviewers.
I totally think you're unbiased
like
as long as you agree with me.
Yeah, exactly. So, let's see. Any other topics anybody can think of?
Sorry, I just looked over at our chat room. We have someone I haven't seen in our chat room, Abdawan Brahmin.
Rahim
wants to know which one of us has created the most Foundry missions. That I think
not
that
me.
would be Drogyn. I think that would be Drogyn at this point.
I think I'm on 15 or 16.
Yeah.
Like actual published missions or in creation?
Actual published missions. Yes, actual published missions.
Yeah, and I agree with what SFC is saying in the chat room. Look at the spotlights. Usually, those that are chosen for the spotlights are very good missions in some way or another.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And there's all sorts of different ones where that are all sorts of different levels. So if you're fairly new to Stowe, there's going to be some Foundry missions, some spotlights that show up right away when you hit level 10 or 11 or whatever it is when you can start using the Foundry.
It's level 2. It's as soon as you're out of the... I'm not kidding.
For KDF and Fed, right?
Yeah, for KDF and Fed, and for Romulan,
because for Romulan, as soon as you choose an allegiance. That's right.
I should point out that for anyone who has exhausted the featured episode list and is looking for more, Kirkvat has a great missions list on the forums, and I will link it in the chat in the show notes, which is a great place to find even more. And you could spend a impressive amount of time going through all of those.
Yeah. And I mean, you're one of the other things that I always recommend is to, when you find a spotlight mission that you like, make a note of who the author was, because chances are they've got other missions, and you might like those as well.
And you can search for it by author as well as by mission title to find more missions.
Mm-hmm. And the nice part about the Foundry is it's not end game content, really.
No.
I mean, there are some that are very difficult, but for the vast majority, it's not end game content. You don't need to be really geared to do it. I mean, there's been a couple of ones where I was like, God, I wish I was a little bit more powerful because I got my butt kicked.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah, none of them are horribly tough unless
because of course that's always up to the author.
Yeah, and keep in mind that their level requirement is based on what mobs the author ends up choosing to use. So you have missions throughout the ranges. Some won't unlock until you reach max level. Some
so like if the enemies are Klingons, it's going to be any level. If the enemies are Borg, it's going to be 42, I think, 43. If they're Voth, it's going to be 50.
Yeah. And I mean, there's ones throughout. I know Hippiejohn have a set level.
16. Because they're with the Romulans. They're 16.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah. That list right there you should have no trouble finding.
Yeah, but essentially the spotlights are supposed to be the best of what the Foundry has to offer. But again, through a person's filter and a person's subjective notion of what the Foundry has to offer. I mean, the first person being Brandflakes and now Captain Smirk.
And of course, he can only go through so many missions at a time.
Sure.
I seriously doubt that Smirk has played all of the submitted missions, or even probably hasn't even done a fraction of them.
Oh yeah. And he's wondering if there are any Foundry missions which are chains, which actually definitely there are tons and tons. As far as featured missions go, Purity is a chain that is all featured. That was the deal we worked out with Cryptic to promote it. And or PWE, I should say, because it was Brandflakes who helped us with that. I know I think there's a couple of like part ones of several series that are spotlighted. And there's any number of people who do
Yeah, it's Rising Phoenix Part 1.
big epic ones.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only one besides Purity I'm seeing at the moment. At least that bothers to put a Part 1 on it.
Yeah. Some people don't label theirs as part 1 in the mission title. I always like to do that personally.
It's trying to confuse us all. But yeah, I mean, I sometimes think that chains are actually more popular than single one-off missions.
Now he's got another question here. Are there something for multiple people where you could do them with a friend? Now, not a lot of authors that I've run into really build their missions for group play, but they can all be done with group play. I mean, there's no way to restrict people from not doing it.
Yeah, I mean, you can bring in a full team. I think a few missions, if they get really fancy, will start to run into issues because they'll have interacts that are based off of
but I think the
whoever
vast
enters
majority
first.
you can play with multiple people.
Yeah, and we certainly
You just have to know going in that the author has probably written them for one person, as far as the dialogue goes.
Yeah, but then again, most of the Federation or Crypto.
Yeah, definitely. I think it would be interesting, and here's another challenge: is write a mission specifically for team play, where it addresses you as multiple captains.
That would be a first. I don't know. I don't know if many authors would want to restrict themselves to group play. Group play is usually in the minority.
It's an interesting one. I don't know. Maybe Captain Smirk will listen to this and do some crazy challenges. It's crazy difficult stuff.
Maybe.
All right. Well, why don't we let this go here? And Dragoon, if you want to put up the contact info.
Okay. All right. If everyone wants to email us, we can be reached at foundryroundtable@live.com. Drogyn, did you remember to check it this week?
Check what?
The email.
What email?
Which, better yet, you can find us on Twitter at Foundry Roundtab, which thankfully Drogyn is not the only person who watches that one. I also watch it. Drogyn can be reached at Drogyn1701. Hippiejohn can be reached at Hippie_John. Markhawkman can be reached at MARHawkman. And Mark, it was totally awesome to see you actually post to Twitter. And I can be reached at Greendragoon with 2 O's.
Excellent. Well, we will say goodnight to everybody.
All right.
And thank you for joining us, to our new people. It's first time joining us. So thank you very much.
One last note. Tumor Boy answered our question about what in the world Smirk meant by the Foundry update. And apparently he was referring to the fact that a lot of people had said that they wanted needed more Romulan assets after the Foundry Challenge was started, and he was talking about potentially the idea of getting more in.
And he said he was parroting Taco's comment on the forums about maybe that was something he'd do.
Okay. So in that case, nothing confirmed, and no secret update that we missed somehow.
In other words, person A said something, person B attempted to repeat it, but it came out differently. And basically it's telephone all over again.
And of course, we being the typical players, jumped on it and tried to figure out what it meant and tried to read between the lines.
But it also just shows Smirk often operates on the same information we have.
Also true. Well, thanks everyone for joining us, and we will say good night.
All right, good night.
Good night.
Good night.